Zara's silver scales rippled with terror as the massive human ship descended through Kepler 442b's purple atmosphere. Her elongated fingers clutched the communication device so tightly that her claws left deep scratches in the metal surface. Every member of her species, the Vexari, had heard the stories whispered in the deepest caves of their homeworld. Humans were monsters, cannibals, planet devourers. The stories painted them as savage beasts who consumed entire civilizations, grinding bones between their teeth and drinking the blood of conquered worlds. The Galactic Council had banned all contact with Earth sector after the infamous Terra incident 50 cycles ago. No one spoke of what happened there, but the silence itself was terrifying enough. High Counselor, her assistant Krell whispered, his own scales shifting from their usual blue to a sickly green. Perhaps we should activate the planetary defense grid? Zara shook her head, though every instinct screamed at her to do exactly that. Our weapons would be useless against them. The reports from the Outer Rim conflicts show their ships can withstand concentrated fire from entire fleets. She paused, watching as the human vessel settled into orbit above their capital city. Besides, if we attack first, they'll have justification for what comes next. The ship was unlike anything in their databases. Where Vexari vessels curved gracefully like sea creatures, this human craft was all sharp angles and brutal efficiency. Its hull bore scars from countless battles, and weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some predatory creature. Even at this distance, Zara could feel the raw power emanating from its engines. "Incoming transmission," announced the communication officer, her voice barely above a whisper. Zara's throat constricted. This was it. The humans would demand tribute, resources, perhaps even living Vexari to satisfy their legendary appetite. She had read the restricted files about species that had encountered humans before. The lucky ones were simply enslaved. The unlucky ones disappeared entirely, their worlds left as barren husks. "Put it through," she commanded, straightening her ceremonial robes. If she was going to be the last High Counselor of her people, she would face these monsters with dignity. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human face. Zara's breath caught in her throat. The creature was smaller than she expected, with pale skin stretched over a delicate bone structure. Short brown hair crowned its head, and most disturbing of all were its forward-facing eyes. Predator eyes designed for hunting and killing. "Greetings," the human said, its voice surprisingly soft. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Alliance vessel Endeavour. We come seeking trade and diplomatic relations with the Vexari people." "Trade?" Zara blinked in confusion. Surely this was some kind of trap. Humans didn't trade. They took. Everyone knew that. Her diplomatic training kicked in despite her fear. "I am High Counselor Zara of the Vexari Confederacy. Your reputation precedes you, Captain Chen." The human's expression shifted, becoming somehow sadder. "I see you've heard the stories. I understand your fear, High Counselor. Many species react this way to first contact with humanity. But I assure you, we mean no harm to your people." "No harm?" Zara's claws extended involuntarily. This human spoke as if it were some peaceful creature, yet its ship bristled with enough firepower to level continents. The cognitive dissonance was almost painful. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was a predator wearing the mask of diplomacy. "What do you want from us?" she asked bluntly, deciding that direct confrontation might provoke the humans into revealing their true intentions. "We're exploring this sector, mapping new trade routes and establishing peaceful contact with sentient species. We've observed your civilization from a distance and are impressed by your achievements in biotechnology and sustainable energy. We thought there might be mutual benefits to an exchange of knowledge and resources." Zara's mind reeled. The humans spoke of mutual benefit and knowledge exchange as if such things were normal. As if humans weren't the bogeymen that had haunted Vexari nightmares for generations. Her advisors looked equally stunned, their scales rippling through confusion patterns she hadn't seen since their academy days. "You expect us to believe," she said slowly, "that humanity seeks peaceful coexistence?" Captain Chen nodded, her expression remaining earnest. "I know it's difficult to accept, given what you've likely been told about us. The galaxy is full of misconceptions about humanity. Some stem from fear, others from deliberate misinformation spread by hostile forces. But I'm willing to prove our intentions through actions, not just words. And if we refuse your offer?" The human's shoulders rose and fell in what Zara recognized as a shrug from her xenobiology studies. "Then we'll respect your decision and leave your system in peace. We don't force trade partnerships or diplomatic relations. Consent is fundamental to human ethics. Ethics? Zara nearly laughed at the absurdity. These creatures who allegedly consumed worlds and enslaved populations claimed to have ethics? Yet something in the human's tone gave her pause. There was no threat in those words, no hidden menace, just a simple statement of fact that confused her more than any ultimatum would have. "I need time to consider your proposal," she said finally. "Of course. We'll maintain our current position and await your response. There's no rush, High Counselor. Take all the time you need." The transmission ended, leaving Zara staring at the empty hologram projector. Around her, the council chamber buzzed with whispered conversations and nervous energy. Her advisors looked as bewildered as she felt. Krell approached cautiously. "High Counselor, what do you think this means? Could the stories have been wrong?" Zara turned to gaze out the transparent aluminum windows at the human ship hanging in their sky like a sword of judgment. Everything she thought she knew about the universe had just been challenged by a soft-spoken human captain who spoke of ethics and consent. Either this was the most elaborate trap in galactic history, or the Vexari had been living in fear of shadows for 50 cycles. "I don't know, Krell," she admitted quietly, "but I intend to find out. Summon the full council. We have a decision to make that could determine the future of our species." As her assistant hurried away, Zara remained at the window, watching the human ship and wondering if she was about to make the greatest mistake in Vexari history, or discover that the monsters from their nightmares might actually be something far more dangerous to their worldview. They might be friends. The Vexari High Council chamber buzzed with anxious energy, as 12 of the most senior members of their species debated humanity's unprecedented offer. Ancient stone walls carved with the flowing script of their ancestors seemed to lean in as if listening to the momentous discussion unfolding within. "This is obviously a trap," declared Counselor Vex, his crimson scales flashing with agitation. "Humans are testing our defenses, learning our weaknesses before they strike. The moment we lower our guard, they'll swarm our planet like the parasites they are." "But what if they're not?" countered Counselor Lyra, her younger voice cutting through the older male's certainty. "What if 50 cycles of fear have blinded us to the truth?" Captain Chen seemed genuinely peaceful. "Seemed?" Vex spat, his tail lashing against his chair. Of course she seemed peaceful. That's how predators operate. They lure their prey into false security before they feast. Zara listened to the heated debate while studying the classified files spread across her private tablet. These documents, sealed in the deepest vaults of Vexari intelligence, painted a disturbing picture that contradicted everything their society believed about humanity. The more she read, the more her certainty crumbled. "Council members," she said, her voice cutting through the argument. The chamber fell silent. "I've been reviewing our intelligence archives, the classified ones from before the information blackout." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. These files were legendary among the council, spoken of only in whispers and available to only the highest security clearances. "What do they say, High Counselor?" asked Elder Morse, the oldest member present at nearly 300 cycles. Zara activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images began cycling through testimonials from various species who had encountered humanity in the past 50 cycles. But these weren't the horror stories their propaganda had promoted. The Kalari Coalition reports that humans provided medical aid during their plague outbreak, asking for nothing in return except the opportunity to study the disease to prevent future pandemics. The Zephyrian Trade Union describes human merchants as annoyingly honest and frustratingly fair in their dealings. More images flashed by. Construction projects, rescue operations, scientific collaborations, all featuring humans working alongside alien species in apparent harmony. The Andromedans describe human military intervention in their civil war. But look at this report carefully. She highlighted a specific section. The humans didn't choose a side. They created safe corridors for civilians to escape the fighting and provided neutral ground for peace negotiations. Counselor Vex's scales had shifted to a confused purple. "But the Terra incident. Everyone knows about the Terra incident. Do we?" Zara challenged. "Or do we know what we've been told about it?" She pulled up another file, this one heavily redacted. The only surviving records from that event come from a single source, the Hegemony War Council. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The Hegemony was their oldest enemy, a coalition of militaristic species that had been trying to expand into Vexari space for over a century. If their information about humans came from the hegemony, are you suggesting, Elder Morse said slowly, that we've been deliberately misinformed about humanity? Before Zara could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Emergency lights bathed the room in harsh red as Communication Officer Tills burst through the sealed doors. High Counselor, 3 hegemony battlecruisers just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our system. They're demanding we surrender the human ship to them immediately. The blood drained from Zara's scales, turning them an ashen gray. The hegemony had found them. Worse, they specifically wanted the humans. This couldn't be a coincidence. Patch me through to both the hegemony fleet and Captain Chen, she ordered, her mind racing. Emergency protocol. All civilian populations to shelters immediately. The chamber's main display split into 2 screens. On the left appeared the snarling face of General Krex, a hegemony warlord whose species resembled armored insects. On the right, Captain Chen looked concerned but calm. Vexari scum, General Krex clicked, his mandibles dripping with contempt. You harbor the human plague ship in your system. Surrender it to us for proper disposal, and we might allow your pathetic species to continue existing. General Krex, Captain Chen said, her voice steady despite facing what was clearly a superior military force. I wasn't aware the hegemony had claims in this sector. We claim wherever human filth threatens decent species, Krex snarled. Your kind spreads like a disease, corrupting pure races with your weakness and sentiment. The galaxy will be cleaner once you're extinct. Zara watched this exchange with growing understanding. The pieces of a massive deception were falling into place. General, by what authority do you make demands in Vexari space? By the authority of strength, primitive. Stand aside or share the human's fate. High Counselor, Captain Chen said quietly. I'm detecting energy buildups in the hegemony ships. They're preparing to fire on your planet. Zara's worst fears were confirmed. This wasn't about the humans at all. The hegemony was using humanity as an excuse to finally attack her people. They'd probably been spreading anti-human propaganda for decades, preparing other species to view Earth's children as monsters so no one would defend them. Captain Chen, she said, making a decision that would echo through Vexari history. I hereby grant your ship sanctuary in our system and request immediate military assistance against hegemony aggression. The chamber erupted in chaos. Half the council shouted in approval, while the other half screamed in terror. Through it all, General Krex's laughter cut like a blade. Excellent, he clicked. Now we can eliminate 2 problems at once. Prepare to watch your new human friends abandon you to save their own shells, Vexari. Captain Chen's expression had hardened into something that sent chills down Zara's spine. This was the first glimpse of what a human looked like when truly angry. General, Chen said, her soft voice now carrying an edge of steel. You've just made a very serious mistake. Endeavor to Fleet Command, Priority Alpha. Hegemony forces are engaging in unprovoked aggression against our new allies. Request immediate reinforcement and authorization for defensive action. Your single ship against our 3? Krex laughed. Even humans aren't that stupid. Chen smiled, and for the first time Zara understood why other species might fear humanity. It wasn't the expression of a prey animal. It was the smile of something that had just decided to stop playing nice. General, let me share something about human nature that your propaganda probably left out. We really don't like bullies. The human ship began moving, accelerating toward the hegemony fleet with what seemed like suicidal intent. But as Zara watched the tactical display, she realized Captain Chen's ship was performing maneuvers that should have been impossible. It danced between enemy fire like a living thing, its weapons striking with surgical precision. The stories were right about one thing, she realized with growing amazement. Humans were dangerous when provoked. But they weren't the monsters the galaxy had been taught to fear. They were the monsters that other monsters feared. The space above Kepler 442b erupted into chaos as the Endeavour engaged 3 hegemony warships in what should have been a hopeless battle. Zara watched from the council chamber, her claws gripping the armrests of her chair as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. Captain Chen's ship moved like no vessel she'd ever seen. It didn't lumber through space like traditional warships, but flowed like liquid mercury, its hull seeming to bend and twist in ways that defied physics. Hegemony plasma bolts that should have vaporized the smaller craft passed harmlessly through empty space as the Endeavour simply wasn't where it was supposed to be. How is that possible? Whispered Elder Morse, his ancient eyes wide with disbelief. Human adaptive technology, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. A human figure materialized from what had appeared to be empty air, causing half the council to leap from their seats in terror. The newcomer was tall and lean, wearing what looked like form-fitting black fabric that seemed to absorb light. "My apologies for the unconventional entrance," the human said, raising empty hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Endeavor's diplomatic officer. Captain Chen thought it might be helpful if someone explained what you're seeing." Zara's scales had gone completely white with shock. "How did you get in here?" "Our building is sealed," Lieutenant Webb smiled apologetically. "Human infiltration training is quite thorough. But I assure you, I'm here to help, not harm. May I?" He gestured toward the tactical display, still reeling from the casual breach of their most secure facility. Zara nodded weakly. "What you're witnessing isn't magic or impossible technology," Webb explained, manipulating the holographic controls with surprising familiarity. "It's the result of human combat philosophy. Most species build their warships for direct confrontation, trading firepower for maneuverability. Humans learned early that in space combat, the ship that gets hit first usually loses." The display zoomed in on the Endeavour as it spiraled between two hegemony cruisers, its weapon systems targeting what appeared to be random points on the enemy hulls. "Captain Chen isn't trying to destroy those ships," Webb continued. "She's systematically disabling their weapons, engines, and life support. The goal isn't annihilation but incapacitation." "But why?" asked Counselor Lyra. "If these hegemony forces are your enemies." "Because," Webb said gently, "those ships contain thousands of crew members, most of whom probably have families waiting for them at home. Human military doctrine prioritizes minimizing casualties whenever possible, even among hostile forces." Zara stared at the human in complete bewilderment. Everything about this creature contradicted the stories she'd grown up with. Humans were supposed to be savage killers who slaughtered without mercy, yet this one spoke of protecting enemy lives as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. "The first hegemony ship is dead in space," reported Communication Officer Tills. "No weapons, no engines, but life support intact. The second is trying to retreat, but the human ship is somehow staying with it despite being outgunned." On the display, the second hegemony cruiser had indeed turned to flee, its massive engines glowing white-hot with emergency power, but the Endeavour maintained position like it was tethered to the larger ship, its weapons methodically picking apart the cruiser's offensive capabilities. "Your ship is incredibly fast," observed Elder Morse. "Not particularly," Webb replied, "but it's smart. Human ships aren't just vessels. They're integrated AI systems. The Endeavour can predict and counter enemy movements before they're fully executed." "Artificial intelligence?" Vex's scales turned an alarmed orange. "You've created machine minds?" "We've partnered with them," Webb corrected. "Human AI development focused on collaboration rather than domination. Our ship's computers are more like crew members than tools." The third hegemony vessel had begun broadcasting surrender signals, much to everyone's astonishment. A warship that size should have been able to crush the Endeavour through sheer firepower. Yet its commander was yielding after watching his allies get systematically dismantled without being destroyed. "Incoming transmission from General Krex," Tills announced. The insectoid warlord appeared on screen, his mandibles clicking with what might have been respect mixed with fury. "Impossible. Human ship, identify yourself." Captain Chen's voice came through crystal clear. "Earth Alliance vessel Endeavour, Captain Sarah Chen commanding. General, your forces have been disabled but not destroyed. I strongly recommend you withdraw from Vixari space immediately." "You spared my crews?" Krex's compound eyes seemed to refocus as if seeing something unexpected. "Of course. They were following orders, not making war crimes. Your people can repair their ships and return home to their families." Silence stretched across the communication channel. When Krex spoke again, his tone had changed entirely. "Human Captain, the Hegemony War Council informed us that your species shows no mercy to defeated enemies, that you consume the flesh of conquered foes." Chen's laugh was genuinely amused. "General, humans stopped eating other sentients roughly 50,000 years ago. As for mercy, I've just demonstrated our policy toward defeated enemies. You're free to leave, but the Terra incident. Your species' attack on the hegemony research station. Research station? Chen's voice hardened. Is that what they told you? General, that facility was a slave processing center. We freed over 10,000 sentients from various species who were being prepared for auction to the highest bidders. Zara felt the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The hegemony hadn't just been spreading propaganda about humanity. They'd been actively engaged in the slave trade, and humans had stopped them. The War Council said you slaughtered the entire garrison, Craig said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. We arrested them. They received fair trials under galactic law. Most are serving time in rehabilitation facilities. The commanders who directly participated in the slave trade were executed, yes, but only after due process. Webb leaned closer to Zara. High Counselor, I should mention that among the slaves we freed were 300 Vexari citizens who had been captured during hegemony raids over the past decade. The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. 300 of their people had been enslaved, and none of them had known. The hegemony had been raiding their shipping lanes for years, stealing their citizens, and they'd blamed pirates. General Krex, Chen continued, I'm transmitting the complete records from the Terra facility raid to your ship. You'll find video documentation of everything we found there, including the auction records showing which hegemony officials were selling slaves. Another long pause. When Krex spoke again, he sounded like a different being entirely. Captain Chen, if what you say is true, the War Council has been lying to us for 50 cycles. I'm afraid so, General. The hegemony leadership has been using anti-human propaganda to justify aggressive expansion while covering up their own crimes. Your people have been used as unwitting weapons in their schemes. I must report to my superiors immediately. Of course. But General, if I may make a suggestion, perhaps it's time for the hegemony military to start asking questions about the orders they've been given. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Outside, the 3 hegemony ships were slowly limping away from the system, their weapons silent and their crews presumably contemplating everything they'd just learned. Zara looked at Lieutenant Webb, her worldview crumbling and rebuilding itself in real time. You came here to trade, she said weakly. We did, he confirmed. But we also came to help. High Counselor, humanity learned long ago that the universe is a dangerous place. The only way to survive is to make friends, not enemies. To protect those who can't protect themselves. To stand up to bullies wherever we find them. She stared out at the stars, where the Endeavour now hung peacefully in orbit, its weapons powered down, and its crew probably checking on their former enemies to ensure their life support. Systems were functioning properly. The monsters she'd feared would devour her people were instead offering to protect them, and for the first time in 50 cycles, Zara began to believe that maybe the galaxy wasn't as dark a place as she'd always thought. 3 days after the hegemony retreat, Zara found herself aboard the human vessel Endeavour. Her diplomatic entourage nervous but curious as they explored their former nightmare made manifest. What they discovered challenged every assumption they'd held about humanity's nature. The ship's corridors were wider than necessary for human physiology, designed to accommodate species of various sizes. Soft lighting mimicked natural daylight cycles, and the walls displayed slowly shifting artwork from dozens of different worlds. Most surprising of all, the crew included several non-human species working alongside their human companions, with obvious mutual respect. This is Dr. Thessarian, Captain Chen said, introducing a tall, ethereal being with translucent skin and silver hair. She's our xenobiology specialist and happens to be Andromedan. Zara's scales shifted to polite blue as she extended a formal greeting. But the Andromedan surprised her by offering a warm, very human-like handshake instead. High Counselor, Dr. Thessarian said in accented but perfect Vexari, I've studied your species' biotechnology innovations for years. Your work on symbiotic plant integration is revolutionary. You speak our language? Zara asked, surprised. The crew learns the languages of species we encounter, Chen explained. Cultural exchange requires genuine communication, not just translation software. As they walked through the ship, Zara noticed details that painted an increasingly complex picture of humanity. The recreational areas included meditation spaces designed for different species' spiritual needs. The cafeteria served cuisine from 100 worlds. The library contained literature translated from languages she'd never heard of. Captain, she said finally, I need to ask directly. Why do you do this? Building ships for others, learning our languages, protecting species you've never met before? Chen paused at a large viewport showing Kepler 442b hanging in space below them. May I tell you about human history, High Counselor? They settled in a comfortable lounge area while Chen activated a holographic display showing Earth's blue-green surface. For most of our evolution, humans were prey animals, she began. We weren't the strongest or fastest on our world. We survived by working together, by forming communities that protected the weak and shared resources with those in need. Images flashed by showing early human settlements, groups working together to build shelters and grow food. When we finally reached space, we brought those instincts with us. The idea that survival depends on cooperation rather than domination. But surely you must have conflicts among yourselves, protested Counselor Vex, who had reluctantly joined the diplomatic mission. Constantly, Chen admitted with a rueful smile. Humans are remarkably good at finding things to disagree about. But we learned something important from our wars. The cost of conflict is always higher than the cost of cooperation. She changed the display to show scenes of devastation from humanity's past conflicts, then images of rebuilding and reconciliation. Our greatest wars taught us that military victory means nothing if you destroy everything worth protecting in the process. So we developed different strategies. Diplomacy first, defense second, offense only as an absolute last resort. Dr. Thessarian joined the conversation. High Counselor, I was present during humanity's first contact with my people. The Andromedan Empire was torn apart by civil war, with billions dying in the crossfire. When human ships arrived, we assumed they would choose the strongest faction and help them claim total victory. But they didn't, Zara guessed. They landed medical supplies in the middle of both armies and declared the drop zone neutral territory. The Andromedan continued. Human soldiers stood between our warriors with nothing but medical equipment and emergency food. They said anyone who wanted to keep fighting would have to go through them first. And that worked? Eventually. It took weeks, but both sides realized that the humans cared more about saving Andromedan lives than about which faction won. They mediated our peace negotiations and helped us rebuild afterward. Never asked for anything in return except friendship. Captain Chen pulled up another display showing current human space. Unlike the expanding empires Zara was familiar with, human territory looked more like a web, connecting dozens of different species systems. This is why we explore, High Counselor. Not to conquer or expand, but to find new friends, to learn from other cultures and share what we've learned. To make sure that when species like the hegemony try to exploit others, they face unified opposition. Speaking of which, Lieutenant Webb said, entering the lounge, we've just received some interesting intelligence from General Krex. The display switched to show a tactical map of hegemony space. Large portions were marked in red, indicating internal conflict. It seems our conversation with the general had wider implications than expected, Webb continued. He shared the Terra facility records with other hegemony military commanders. They're discovering that most of their recent wars were based on fabricated intelligence from the War Council. A military rebellion? Zara asked. More like a military awakening, Chen corrected. The hegemony soldiers thought they were protecting their people from various threats. Learning they were actually enforcing a corrupt government's expansion plans has created significant unrest. General Krex sent a personal message, Webb added. Activating an audio file. The insectoid general's translated voice filled the room, but his tone was completely different from their first encounter. Captain Chen, I must formally apologize for my actions in Vexari space. My forces and I were operating under false information provided by our leadership. We have since learned that the War Council has been systematically lying to the military about the nature of our conflicts. He paused, and when he continued, there was something that might have been gratitude in his voice. Your decision to disable rather than destroy my ships saved the lives of 12,000 hegemony personnel. These soldiers are now questioning everything they've been told about human nature. Word is spreading throughout our fleets that humans are not the monsters we were taught to fear. The message continued. I am formally requesting asylum for myself and my entire command structure. We can no longer serve a government that uses its military for slavery and genocide while claiming to protect civilization. Silence filled the lounge as the implications sank in. A significant portion of the hegemony's military was in open rebellion against their own government, largely because humans had shown mercy to defeated enemies. This happens often, Dr. Thessarian said quietly. Human behavior confuses species that are accustomed to might makes right philosophy. When you consistently choose cooperation over domination, other beings begin to question their own assumptions. Zara felt her worldview shifting again. These humans weren't just offering friendship to her people. They were accidentally triggering revolutions throughout hostile space simply by acting according to their moral principles. Captain, she said, I believe my people have much to learn from yours. Would you be willing to extend your stay while we discuss formal diplomatic relations? Of course, High Counselor. Though I should warn you that formal relations with humanity come with certain expectations, such as, Chen smiled, we'll probably ask you to help us rescue those 300 Vexari citizens who are still enslaved in hegemony space, and we'll want to share our medical technology to help treat the trauma they've experienced. And we'll suggest establishing joint patrols to prevent future slave raids. Zara looked around at the humans and their multi-species crew, all of whom seemed genuinely concerned about the welfare of people they'd never met. The monsters from her childhood nightmares had turned out to be the galaxy's protectors. Captain Chen, she said formally, the Vexari Confederacy would be honored to join humanity's network of allied species. As they shook hands in the human tradition, Zara realized that her greatest fear had been realized in the most unexpected way possible. Humans were indeed going to devour her people's way of life. They were going to replace it with something much better. 2 weeks later, the joint Vexari human rescue operation was underway in the disputed border region known as the Shattered Zone. Zara found herself aboard a specially modified human stealth ship, watching her own people work alongside their former nightmares to free enslaved Vexari from hegemony processing facilities. The transformation in her own species had been remarkable to witness. Once word spread that humans were not the monsters of legend, Vexari volunteers had flocked to join the rescue mission. Many were motivated by anger at learning about the slave raids, but others seemed driven by something else entirely: curiosity about these strange aliens who put themselves at risk for strangers. Approaching target facility Zeta-7, announced Commander Torres, a stocky human woman whose scarred hands spoke of extensive military experience. Thermal scans confirm approximately 40 Vexari life signs, along with representatives from 6 other species. Zara studied the tactical display showing the prison complex built into an asteroid. The facility was designed to be invisible to casual scans, hidden among the rock debris of a shattered planet. Only defecting hegemony officers like General Krex could have provided its location. The plan remains unchanged, Torres continued, addressing the mixed crew of humans, Vexari, and several hegemony defectors. Team Alpha infiltrates and secures the prisoners. Team Beta disables the facility's communications and weapons. Team Charlie handles evacuation. Everyone goes home alive. Including the guards? Asked Lieutenant Zell, one of General Krex's former subordinates who had volunteered for the mission. Especially the guards, Torres replied firmly. They're following orders just like you were. We disable, capture if necessary, but no killing unless absolutely unavoidable. Zara marveled at the human approach to warfare. Even when dealing with those who had enslaved her people, they maintained strict rules about minimizing casualties. It was as if they were physically incapable of using excessive force. The stealth ship docked with the asteroid facility using captured hegemony access codes. As they moved through the corridors, Zara witnessed human soldiers in action for the first time. They moved like liquid shadows, appearing and disappearing with supernatural skill. Guards were stunned unconscious before they could sound alarms, their weapons disabled with surgical precision. "This way," whispered Sergeant Kim, a compact human whose movements reminded Zara of a hunting cat. They followed her through maintenance shafts toward the detention level. The prison cells were worse than anything Zara had imagined. Cramped metal cages held sentience from across the galaxy, their conditions deliberately degrading to break their spirits before sale. The stench of fear and despair was overwhelming even through her breathing apparatus. "By the depths," she whispered in her native tongue, seeing Vexari citizens she recognized from missing person reports filed years ago. "I know," Sergeant Kim said softly, apparently understanding the emotional content if not the words. "But they're going to be okay now. That's a promise." The rescue proceeded with clockwork precision. Human soldiers moved through the facility like ghosts, neutralizing security systems and guards with minimal fuss. Meanwhile, Vexari medics began treating the freed prisoners, many of whom were suffering from malnutrition and psychological trauma. What struck Zara most was how the humans interacted with the freed slaves. There was no pity in their manner, no condescension toward the victims. Instead, they treated each person with quiet dignity, offering practical help while respecting their autonomy. "High Counselor?" A weak voice called out in Vixari. Zara turned to see a young female she recognized as Liz, a promising scientist who had disappeared 3 years ago. "Liz, you're safe now. We're taking everyone home." The young Vixari's scales were dull from poor nutrition, but her eyes were alert. "The humans? They really came to save us?" "They did, and they didn't ask for anything in return. But why? We're not their people." Zara looked around at the human soldiers carefully helping former prisoners to their feet, sharing their own rations with the starving, speaking gentle words in a dozen different languages. "Because that's what humans do," she said, finally understanding something fundamental about their new allies. They help because help is needed. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly when alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the facility. Commander Torres's voice crackled through their communications. "All teams, we have a problem. 3 hegemony warships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're moving to intercept us." Through the facility's viewports, Zara could see the approaching vessels. Unlike General Krex's forces, these ships bore the black markings of the Hegemony War Council's personal fleet. The true believers who weren't questioning their orders. "Can we escape before they arrive?" she asked. "Not with all the prisoners," Torres replied grimly. "The rescued slaves are too weak for rapid evacuation. We need more time." Lieutenant Zell's voice cut through the channel. "Commander, I know the captain of the lead ship. Admiral Vorth commanded the facility where I was stationed before my defection. He's completely loyal to the War Council and believes humans are an existential threat to all civilized life. Recommendations? He won't negotiate, won't show mercy. If he catches us here, he'll execute the prisoners as contaminated by human influence and use our presence as justification for a massive military campaign against Earth's allies." Zara felt her blood chill. After everything they'd accomplished, were they about to lose everything to a fanatic? "Then we don't let him catch us," Torres said with grim determination. "Team Alpha, continue the evacuation. Team Beta, prepare for defensive action." "Commander, you can't fight 3 cruisers with a stealth ship," protested one of her officers. "We're not going to fight them," Torres replied. "We're going to annoy them until help arrives." "Help?" Torres smiled, and Zara was beginning to recognize that particular human expression. It meant someone was about to do something impossible. "Did you really think we'd attempt a rescue operation in hostile space without backup? Captain Chen's battle group has been shadowing us at maximum stealth range. They're about to decloak and remind Admiral Vorth why attacking humans is a poor life choice." Space around the asteroid suddenly erupted with the flash of emerging starships, not just the Endeavour but an entire squadron of human vessels, each one designed for rapid response and surgical strikes. The hegemony ships found themselves surrounded by opponents that had materialized from nowhere. "Admiral Vorth," came Captain Chen's voice over the communications channel, broadcast to the entire area. "You are interfering with a humanitarian rescue operation in violation of galactic law. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Vorth's reply was filled with venom. "Human scum! You corrupt everything you touch. These prisoners are property of the hegemony state. Sentient beings cannot be property, Admiral. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and withdraw. I will see your entire species burned from the galaxy before I yield to human weakness." The hegemony ships opened fire, but they might as well have been throwing rocks at hurricanes. The human fleet moved with inhuman coordination, their weapons targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, all 3 hegemony vessels were dead in space, their crews alive but their ships completely disabled. "Admiral," Chen said calmly, "you and your crews will be taken into custody and tried for crimes against sentience. Your ships will be impounded as evidence. Any hegemony personnel who wish to defect and testify against the War Council will be granted asylum." The response was immediate. Over half of Admiral Vorth's crews requested transfer to human custody, apparently having witnessed enough of their leadership's brutality. As they finished loading the rescued prisoners onto medical ships, Zara found herself standing beside Commander Torres, watching the hegemony vessels being towed away by human patrol craft. "How many more facilities like this exist?" she asked. "Too many. Torres replied honestly. The hegemony has been running this operation for decades, probably centuries. We've identified 17 more locations that need to be hit. And humans will rescue all of them? Humans and their allies, Torres corrected. This kind of operation works better with local knowledge and cultural understanding. The Vexari teams were invaluable today. Zara nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. You're not just rescuing slaves. You're building a coalition. Every species we help becomes a potential ally against the systems that created these atrocities. Every successful rescue operation demonstrates that resistance is possible. Every hegemony defector we protect encourages others to question their orders. Looking at the rescued prisoners receiving medical care aboard human ships, being treated with the same attention that would be given to human casualties, Zara realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. You're not conquering the galaxy, she said with sudden clarity. You're healing it, Torres smiled. One rescue at a time, High Counselor. One rescue at a time. 6 months after first contact, Zara stood in the newly constructed Vexari Human Cultural Exchange Center, watching her people interact with humans in ways she never could have imagined. The fears that had once dominated her species' collective consciousness had been replaced by something far more dangerous to their old way of thinking: hope. The center itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Vexari biotechnology had grown the structure from modified coral that filtered air and regulated temperature naturally, while human environmental systems ensured perfect atmospheric conditions for both species. Children from both races played together in carefully designed spaces, their laughter echoing through chambers that adapted their acoustics to each species' hearing ranges. High Counselor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, the center's human director, approached with her characteristic warm smile. I wanted to share some preliminary results from our joint research projects. Zara accepted the data tablet, marveling at how natural it had become to work with these former nightmares. The research collaborations had begun almost immediately, after formal diplomatic relations were established, with both species eager to share knowledge. The agricultural integration program is exceeding all projections, Dr. Martinez continued. Combining Vexari symbiotic plant cultivation with human soil regeneration techniques has increased crop yields by 300% on both worlds. And the medical exchange? Revolutionary. Human trauma therapy combined with Vexari biochemical healing has created treatment protocols that are helping not just our rescued prisoners, but anyone dealing with psychological wounds. We're sharing the techniques with every species in the Alliance. The Alliance. What had started as a desperate attempt to resist hegemony expansion had grown into something unprecedented, a true galactic confederation based on mutual aid rather than dominance. 17 species now work together, sharing technology, culture, and resources while maintaining their individual sovereignty. There's something else, Dr. Martinez said, her expression becoming more serious. We've been analyzing the psychological profiles of hegemony defectors, trying to understand what motivates their leadership. The patterns are disturbing. Zara followed her to a private office where classified materials could be discussed safely. The data Dr. Martinez showed her painted a picture of systematic psychological manipulation spanning centuries. The Hegemony War Council isn't just militaristic, the human explained. They're genuinely terrified of what they call contamination by empathy. They believe that cooperation and mutual aid are weaknesses that will destroy civilization. But that's clearly false. Look at what we've accomplished together. Exactly. Which is why they consider the human alliance an existential threat. Not because we're militarily superior, but because we're proving their entire worldview wrong. Zara studied the intercepted hegemony communications displayed on the screen. The language was filled with references to purification and cleansing the galaxy of human corruption. It read like the ravings of a religious extremist movement rather than rational military planning. They're planning something big, aren't they? Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. Intelligence suggests they're massing their entire remaining fleet for what they're calling the final solution to the human problem. Or they intend to strike at Earth itself, believing that destroying humanity's homeworld will cause the Alliance to collapse. The thought of Earth under attack sent chills through Zara's scales. In the months since meeting humans, She had come to understand that their homeworld wasn't just another planet to them. It was the birthplace of everything they held sacred: diversity, cooperation, the protection of the weak. What's the Alliance's response? That's what I wanted to discuss with you. Captain Chen and the Military Council have developed a strategy, but it requires something unprecedented. Every Alliance species contributing forces for the defense of a world that isn't their own. Zara considered this carefully. Asking the Vexari to send their ships to protect Earth would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. But now, after seeing humans risk their lives to rescue enslaved Vexari, after watching them share their most advanced technologies freely, after witnessing their consistent protection of weaker species, the Vexari Council will need to vote, she said finally. But I believe I can convince them. What humans call home, we now consider part of our own territory to defend. Dr. Martinez's eyes brightened with genuine emotion. High Counselor, you have no idea how much that means to us. Actually, I think I do. Humans taught us that family isn't just about shared genetics. It's about shared values and mutual protection. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Captain Chen appeared on the holographic display, her expression serious but determined. High Counselor Dr. Martinez, I'm afraid our intelligence was accurate. Long-range sensors have detected the hegemony's main battle fleet moving toward the Sol system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Size of the force? Zara asked. 800 ships including their mobile fortress platforms. It's the largest military force assembled in recorded galactic history. The numbers were staggering. Even combined, the Alliance fleets numbered fewer than 300 vessels. But Zara had learned not to judge conflicts purely by ship counts when humans were involved. Captain, what do you need from us? Every ship you can spare, High Counselor. But more than that, we need you to trust us with something that goes against every military tradition in the galaxy. Which is? Chen's expression became almost apologetic. We're going to let them reach Earth. Zara's scales went white with shock. Captain, surely you don't mean to use your homeworld as bait. Not bait. A demonstration. High Counselor, the hegemony leadership believes that cooperation is weakness, that diversity leads to chaos, that showing mercy to enemies is suicidal. We're going to prove them wrong in a way that can't be ignored or rationalized away. How? By showing the galaxy what happens when 800 ships attack a world defended by species who choose to stand together. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. Zara, humanity has been preparing for this moment since we first encountered the hegemony's ideology. Earth's defenses aren't just military installations. They're a statement about what we believe civilization should become. Every species in the Alliance will send representatives to Earth, Chen continued. Not just military forces, but civilians, children, cultural delegations. When the hegemony arrives, they'll find a world that embodies everything they claim is impossible. Dozens of species living and working together in harmony. Zara began to understand the audacious scope of what humans were proposing. You're turning the battle for Earth into a public demonstration of Alliance principles. More than that, we're inviting every neutral species in the galaxy to send observers, independent journalists, cultural attachés, military analysts. When this is over, no one will be able to claim they don't know the difference between the hegemony's vision and ours. The communication ended with Chen promising detailed tactical briefings within the hour. Zara sat in silence, contemplating the magnitude of what was being asked. Humans were requesting that every Alliance species risk their ships, their people, their futures on the belief that cooperation could triumph over conquest. Dr. Martinez, she said finally, do you believe it will work? The human smiled with quiet confidence. High Counselor, 6 months ago your people believed humans were monsters who would devour anyone they encountered. Now you're volunteering to defend our homeworld. If we can change minds that dramatically through simple demonstration of our values, imagine what we can accomplish when the entire galaxy is watching. Zara looked out the center's windows at Vexari and human children playing together, their parents from both species watching with shared pride and affection. These youngsters would grow up in a galaxy where cooperation between species was normal, where helping strangers was expected, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. The hegemony chose the wrong enemy, she said with growing conviction. They're not just attacking humanity, they're attacking the future. As she prepared to return to the Vexari capital to address the council, Zara realized that her greatest fear from first contact had indeed come true. Humans had devoured her people's way of life completely. They had replaced it with something worth dying to protect. The sight that greeted the hegemony fleet as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system was unlike anything in their tactical manuals. Instead of the terrified, scattered defenders they expected, they found the most diverse military formation in galactic history arranged in perfect defensive coordination around humanity's blue-green homeworld. Zara stood on the bridge of the Vexari flagship Deep Current, watching the hegemony's massive force spread out across their tactical displays. 800 ships of various classes, from nimble fighters to massive fortress carriers, all bearing the black insignia of the War Council's extremist regime. At their center flew the Purifier, a massive dreadnought larger than some space stations. Fleet Admiral Korath is hailing all ships, reported Communications Officer Tills, who had requested transfer to the Defense Fleet specifically to witness this moment. The holographic display activated, showing a creature that might have once been recognizably hegemony, but had been so heavily cybernetically modified that it resembled a mechanical horror more than a living being. When Admiral Korath spoke, his voice was a synthesized rasp that carried no trace of organic emotion. Attention, corrupted vessels. You defend a plague world that spreads weakness throughout the galaxy. Withdraw immediately and your deaths will be swift. Remain, and you will watch helplessly as we purify this system of human contamination. Captain Chen's voice responded for the entire Alliance fleet, calm and steady despite facing impossible odds. Admiral Korath, you are entering the sovereign space of the United Earth Alliance without permission. Turn back now and no blood needs to be shed today. Blood? Korath's mechanical laughter was genuinely disturbing. We come to cleanse the galaxy of your cooperative disease. Your ships may outnumber our own, but they are manned by dozens of species who cannot possibly coordinate effectively. Chaos will be your downfall. From her position in the Vexari battle line, Zara watched the Alliance response with growing pride. The human prediction had been exactly correct. Korath and his fanatics couldn't conceive of true cooperation between species. They saw the diverse fleet composition as a weakness rather than strength. All Alliance vessels, Chen announced, execute Formation Omega. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The Alliance fleet didn't charge forward or spread out in traditional battle formations. Instead, each species took positions that maximized their particular strengths while supporting their allies' weaknesses. Vexari ships, with their superior long-range sensors, formed an early warning network that fed targeting data to the entire fleet. Andromedan vessels, masters of electronic warfare, began jamming hegemony communications and sensor systems. Kalari fighters, small and fast, took scout positions that could relay real-time tactical information. And at the center of it all, human ships coordinated the dance with a precision that seemed almost telepathic. Impossible, Admiral Korath transmitted, his synthesized voice showing strain. You cannot achieve this level of coordination between so many species. Admiral, Chen replied, that's where you're wrong. Watch and learn. The battle that followed redefined space combat doctrine forever. Rather than the chaotic melee Korath expected, the Alliance fleet fought as a single organism. When hegemony forces concentrated on one section, that group would fade back while others struck from unexpected angles. When the enemy tried to divide their attention, the Alliance would suddenly mass their entire force at the weakest point. Zara watched in amazement as ship captains from 17 different species anticipated each other's moves with perfect timing. A Vexari cruiser would withdraw from combat at the exact moment an Andromedan destroyer moved to cover its position. Human fighters would sweep in to screen damaged alien vessels while their crews effected repairs. High Counselor, her tactical officer reported, the hegemony fleet is taking severe casualties. But we've lost only 7 ships across the entire Alliance formation. How is that possible? Watch the pattern. Every time a ship takes critical damage, the others adjust position to protect it, while it retreats for repairs. No one is fighting alone. Admiral Korath apparently reached the same conclusion. His next transmission was filled with frustrated rage. "This is impossible. Species cannot work together like this. You violate the natural order." "Admiral," came a new voice on the channel. "General Krex, the former hegemony commander who now led alliance forces composed of defectors from throughout the galaxy. This is the natural order. This is what happens when beings choose cooperation over domination. Traitor, you have been contaminated by human weakness." "I have been educated by human strength," Krex replied calmly. "The strength to put principles before personal gain. The strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The strength to show mercy to enemies who deserve none." The hegemony fleet was being systematically dismantled, but what shattered their morale completely was what happened to damaged ships. Instead of being destroyed or abandoned, hegemony vessels that lost main power found themselves surrounded by Alliance medical ships offering assistance to their crews. "Hegemony vessel destroyer, 77 Alpha," came a transmission from a human hospital ship. "Your life support is failing. We're moving to assist with emergency evacuation." We are your enemies," came the confused reply from the hegemony captain. "You are sentient beings in distress," the human medic responded matter-of-factly. "Please prepare your wounded for transfer to our medical facilities." Across the battlefield, this scene repeated dozens of times. Alliance forces would disable enemy ships, then immediately offer medical aid to their crews. Hegemony personnel who had been taught that humans were monsters found themselves being treated by human doctors who worked tirelessly to save enemy lives. Admiral Korath's final gambit was to order his remaining ships to ram Alliance vessels, hoping to cause mutual destruction. But even this desperate tactic failed when Alliance crews began using tractor beams to capture the ramming ships and redirect them away from populated areas. "Admiral," Chen transmitted as the last hegemony resistance collapsed. "Your fleet is defeated. Surrender now and we'll provide medical care for your wounded and fair treatment for your prisoners." "Never. The War Council will send another fleet and another. Humanity must be destroyed." "Admiral, look around you. Look at your own crews," and Korath did look. Across his fleet, ship after ship was laying down arms and requesting asylum with the Alliance. Hegemony personnel who had witnessed Alliance behavior during the battle were refusing to continue fighting. Some ships were broadcasting messages of support for the Alliance cause. "This is impossible," Korath whispered, his synthesized voice barely audible. "This is inevitable," Chen replied gently. "When people see what cooperation can accomplish, they want to be part of it. Admiral, it's not too late. Even now, even after everything you've done, if you choose to lay down arms and work for peace, you'll be welcomed." For a moment, silence filled the communication channels. Then Admiral Korath's mechanical voice resumed, but it sounded different, smaller, almost vulnerable. I have committed atrocities in the name of purity. My hands are stained with the blood of innocence." "Then help us make sure it never happens again," Chen said. "Help us build something better." The surrender of the hegemony's main battle fleet marked the end of their expansion wars. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. The footage of the battle, recorded by neutral observers from across the galaxy, showed definitively what cooperation could accomplish. Standing on Earth's surface weeks later, watching hegemony refugees working alongside Alliance citizens to build new settlements, Zara reflected on how completely her world had changed. The monsters she had feared would devour her people had instead taught them to devour fear itself. "High Counselor," Captain Chen approached, carrying a datapad containing the latest reports from across the galaxy. "I thought you'd want to see this. 43 previously neutral species have requested Alliance membership since the battle. The Hegemony War Council has been overthrown by their own people, who are establishing a democratic government. And the first joint Alliance Hegemony colony ship launched yesterday." Zara smiled, her scales shimmering with contentment. "Captain, when your people first arrived at our world, I was terrified you would destroy everything we hold dear." "And we did," Chen replied with a gentle smile. "We destroyed your isolation. We devoured your fear. We consumed your belief that strength comes from standing alone, and replaced it with something infinitely better." Looking up at the stars where dozens of species now worked together as equals, Zara understood that her childhood nightmares had been prophetic in the most unexpected way. Humans had indeed devoured her people. They had made them part of a family that spanned the galaxy,